Warminster man is arrested and charged with the murder of his girlfriend. The victim you see right here, just 25 years old.
It was June 12, 2010, and Grace Harrison was preparing for a family reunion at the Harrison estate, nestled in the affluent suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia.
It's body cam footage that highlights a disagreement between the wife, arrested in the Bahamas, accused of ordering a hit on her estranged husband. Cops were called after a dispute when Lindsay Shiver apparently changed her plans last minute to ride on the family's private plane to the Bahamas.
The mansion buzzed with activity, catering staff moving swiftly between the kitchen and garden.
Detectives say just before that young man was seen on that Ring doorbell video asking for help and to come in, he was running away from this house where they say he had just shot and killed the man inside who just found him in the bedroom with his 15-year-old daughter.
Tables were decorated with fresh flowers, the pool glistened in the sunlight, and everything seemed perfect. Grace had spent weeks planning this event. But beneath the surface of perfection, a dark reality was about to unfold, one that would forever change her life and family. As the guests began to arrive, Grace Harrison put on a forced smile, greeting family and friends with a calm demeanor. Yet beneath her composed exterior, the weight of years of fear and silence pressed heavily on her shoulders. For years, Grace had suffered in silence, hiding the bruises and covering the emotional scars inflicted by her husband, David. To the outside world, they were the picture of a perfect family, but inside their home, it was a different story, one of control, manipulation, and hidden abuse. Tension rising as Grace stood motionless behind the hedge, her heart sinking as she watched Samantha step into the guest house. The truth of their affair was undeniable. Her mind raced as she thought back to the subtle changes in David's behavior over the past year. The longer hours at the office, the unexplained charges on their credit cards, the lavish dinners, the hotel stays she knew nothing about. Now it all made sense. Samantha Boyd, the ambitious junior associate at David's law firm, was more than just a colleague. She was his mistress. As Grace stood there, her stomach churned with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and fear. David had never been subtle when it came to hiding his affairs, but this was different. This was public, blatant, and unforgiving. Grace's mind flashed to the years of verbal and physical abuse she had endured in silence. The controlling nature, the manipulation, the threats that kept her trapped in this gilded cage. The house, the wealth, the perfect family fa8 had always been a smokescreen, hiding the darkness that had consumed her life. For a moment, Grace felt the weight of the years she had spent trying to keep up appearances. She had been living a lie, and now, that lie was crumbling before her eyes. But what could she do? How could she expose David without losing everything? With a final glance at the guest house, she turned and walked back to the party, the pressure of her discovery weighing heavily on her chest. Her every move felt robotic, as if she were playing a part in a play she no longer wanted to be in. Confrontation by 3:00 p.m., Grace's mind was in turmoil. The tension had become unbearable. David and Samantha rejoined the party, their demeanor casual, as if nothing had happened. But Grace couldn't unsee what she had witnessed. Her heart was racing as she moved through the crowd, handing out glasses of champagne, and forcing herself to engage in conversations she could barely register. Her mother noticed her growing distress once again, pulling her aside and urging her to talk. Grace's response was automatic. She dismissed the concern, offering a weak smile and an excuse about the stress of hosting. As David stood at the center of the gathering, raising his glass in a toast to family, Grace could feel her composure slipping away. His words, full of charm and empty promises, were like daggers to her heart. The guests around her applauded, oblivious to the cracks forming in the Harrison family's perfect facade. Grace clenched her fists beneath the tablecloth, her knuckles white. She had endured years of lies and abuse, but today, something inside her shifted. The anger, the fear, the years of silence. Everything came to a head in that moment. Grace knew she could no longer let David control her life. Her hands shook as she took a deep breath, gathering the strength to speak. She had been quiet for too long. This was the moment she had waited for, the moment she would take control back. With a quiet but firm voice, Grace began to speak. The room fell silent. Her words were raw, filled with the pain of years of abuse, manipulation, and betrayal. As she recounted her torment, her voice grew stronger, unburdening the years of silence. The crowd was stunned, eyes wide with disbelief. But as Grace continued, holding up the folder of evidence, the truth could no longer be denied. This wasn't just a broken marriage, it was a shattered life, and the facade of the perfect family was now completely destroyed. David's downfall, the room was heavy with silence as Grace laid bare the truth, holding up the evidence of David's betrayal. The bank statements, the luxury purchases for Samantha, the hotel stays, and the apartment lease. All of it was there, undeniable. The guests were no longer focused on the celebration, their attention was fixed on the unfolding drama, eyes darting from Grace to David, who stood frozen in stunned silence. The shock was palpable, but it didn't last long. Grace's eyes locked onto Samantha, who was now attempting to shrink into her chair, her face flushed with guilt and panic. The young woman fumbled with her purse, her attempts to remain invisible failing miserably. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and some guests exchanged heated whispers, their judgment on full display. One of David's cousins, known for her fiery loyalty to Grace, stepped forward, blocking Samantha's path as she tried to slip away. The others followed suit, their voices rising in indignation, demanding answers. David's mask of calm shattered. He strode toward Grace, his face twisted in anger. His hand shot out, grabbing her arm with a fierce grip, a desperate attempt to reassert control. The guests who had been too stunned to move before now sprang into action, intervening to pull David away from Grace. The crowd was no longer passive. They were a barrier between David and Grace, protecting her from the very man who had spent years controlling and terrorizing her. David's fury was clear, but his attempts to regain dominance fell flat in the face of collective outrage. The facade of the powerful, charming lawyer he had built for so many years crumbled in an instant. Grace had finally exposed him for what he truly was, an abuser hiding behind wealth and status. The man who once commanded respect and admiration was now the subject of scorn, his empire of lies collapsing before him. The tide had turned, and David's downfall had begun. Grace's new beginning, the courtroom had emptied, the silence was deafening. Grace Harrison walked out, holding Emily and Alex's hands tightly, her heart finally feeling light for the first time in years. The weight of the past, the years of abuse and fear, was being lifted with every step she took away from that courtroom. It wasn't just a victory for her. It was a victory for every woman who had been silenced by fear. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining brightly, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged inside for so long. Grace could feel the cool breeze against her skin as she looked at her children. They were safe. They were free. In the weeks that followed, Grace poured her energy into rebuilding her life. The damages she received in the settlement were put to good use. She opened Grace's Haven, a sanctuary for domestic abuse survivors. It was her way of ensuring no one had to suffer in silence like she did. The foundation offered shelter, support, and a voice to the women who had been too afraid to speak up. For Grace, it was more than just survival. It was about hope, healing, and finding strength in the face of adversity. She wasn't just rebuilding her life, she was helping others rebuild theirs. With Emily and Alex by her side, Grace finally felt at peace. The future, once filled with fear, was now a blank canvas. And for the first time in a long time, it was hers to fill. Wow, what a powerful story of courage, betrayal, and redemption. Grace Harrison's brave decision to expose her husband's darkest secrets changed everything. She took back control of her life and showed us the true strength of resilience. If you're moved by this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future updates on real-life stories of courage and survival. Now, we want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in Grace's shoes? Would you have stayed silent, or would you have exposed the truth, no matter the cost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't miss our next video, the couple who faked their deaths to hide a bigger secret. Coming soon! Stay tuned.